Right now, you are probably carrying a pocket full of ghosts. Whether it is a crisp paper bill tucked into your wallet, a handful of jingling metal discs, or just a string of digital numbers blinking on your smartphone screen when you log into your banking app, you are participating in a daily, near-religious ritual that keeps our entire global civilization from collapsing into chaos. We call it money, we work ourselves to the bone for it, we stress over it, we build massive empires around it, and we spend our short lives chasing it. But if you really stop to look at those paper bills or those glowing pixels, a bizarre, slightly unsettling question starts to creep in. Why does this actually work? Why will a complete stranger hand you a hot, steaming meal, a warm jacket, or even the keys to a vehicle just because you gave them a little piece of green paper or tapped a piece of plastic against a glowing glass pane? If you open up any standard high school economics textbook, you will find a very clean, logical story that explains this mystery. The book will tell you that once upon a time, in the deep prehistoric past, there was no money. Instead, early humans operated in a simple, pure barter economy. If you were a prehistoric hunter who had an extra side of mammoth meat, and you desperately needed a pair of warm leather boots, you had to walk around your camp until you found a shoemaker who happened to have an extra pair of boots and also happened to be starving for mammoth meat. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants, the incredibly unlikely scenario where two people have exactly what the other person needs, at the exact same moment. Because carrying half a mammoth around trying to find a shoemaker was highly inefficient, the textbook says that human beings, being natural-born entrepreneurs, collectively agreed to choose a standard commodity like salt, cattle, or precious metal to act as a medium of exchange. Eventually, we shrank those metals into coins, printed them onto paper, and turned them into the digital dollars we use today. It is a beautiful, intuitive story. The only problem? It is completely, historically, and anthropologically made up. When anthropologists and historians began searching the global record for actual, real-world examples of a community that functioned purely on a barter economy, they found absolutely nothing. As the renowned anthropologist David Graeber pointed out, there is not a single shred of historical evidence that a society ever operated this way. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors did not stand around swapping potatoes for spearheads. In close-knit Paleolithic tribes, people did not trade immediately or keep mathematically precise scores of who owed what. Instead, they operated on what we now call a gift economy or a system of mutual obligation. If your neighbor was a skilled toolmaker and your family was freezing, he simply gave you a warm fur coat or a beautifully crafted stone axe. He did not demand 3 baskets of berries in immediate exchange. He gave it to you because you were part of the same tribe. He gave it to you because he trusted that when his roof leaked, or when his family was hungry next winter, you would be there to help him. It was a fluid, informal system of social credit and community trust, where the human brain and personal memory served as the ultimate, unwritten ledger of debt. But then, everything changed. Around 5,000 years ago, in the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, humans did something revolutionary. We stopped wandering and built the world's very first massive cities, like Uruk and Ur. Suddenly, instead of living in a small band of 50 people where everyone knew each other's names, lineages, and characters, you were living alongside tens of thousands of complete strangers. This created a massive, unprecedented crisis of scale. The human brain has strict biological limits on how many personal relationships and social debts it can track. You can easily remember if your cousin owes you a favor, but you cannot possibly track the trustworthiness of 5,000 strangers walking past your clay brick home. The informal ledger of social trust was completely broken. To solve this, the powerful temple administrators of ancient Sumer had to find a way to make trust physical, math-based, and permanent. They began using tiny clay tokens of various shapes, cones, spheres, and cylinders, to represent specific units of agricultural goods, like a bushel of barley, a jar of olive oil, or a head of livestock. If a farmer brought his harvest to the temple storehouse, the temple accountants did not give him coins. They gave him a collection of these clay tokens representing exactly what he had deposited. To ensure these transactions were secure and could not be altered or forged, the accountants would place the tokens inside a hollow, spherical clay envelope called a bulla. But this created a very annoying practical problem. Once you sealed the clay sphere and baked it dry, you couldn't see how many tokens were inside without completely smashing the envelope open. So, an ingenious Sumerian accountant had a brilliant idea. Before sealing the tokens inside the wet clay sphere, they would press the 3-dimensional tokens onto the soft outer surface of the envelope, leaving behind a clear, 2-dimensional imprint. A circular impression meant a basket of barley, a wedge-shaped mark meant a sheep. Eventually, a lazy, or perhaps incredibly efficient, scribe stared at these clay envelopes and realized something that would change human history forever. They did not need the actual, physical clay tokens sealed inside the sphere at all. The marks on the outside of the clay were doing all the heavy lifting. This realization marks the literal birth of cuneiform writing, The very first sentences ever written by human hands were not epic love poems, religious mythologies, or royal war decrees. They were cold, calculated accounting receipts pressed into wet clay tablets. XOs y 3 bushels of barley. In other words, money did not start as a physical object, it started as an abstract written record of debt. Long before the first metal coin was ever struck, Sumerians were trading with virtual currency, transferring ledger entries of barley and silver from one clay tablet account to another. But while clay ledgers worked perfectly within the administrative borders of a powerful city-state, they were completely useless when trading with merchants from distant lands. A trader from the Mediterranean did not care about a piece of clay written by a Sumerian scribe he would never see again. For long-distance trade, humanity needed a different kind of trust, one that didn't rely on laws, armies, or central ledgers. We needed commodity money. Enter the cowrie shell, specifically, the shell of Monearia moneta, a tiny, polished, porcelain-like sea snail native to the warm, shallow waters of the Maldives in the Indian Ocean. It is hard to overstate how incredibly successful this little shell was. For over 3,000 years, the cowrie shell served as the premier currency of choice across vast stretches of China, India, Southeast Asia, and West Africa. Why did societies across different continents choose this specific shell? Because it possessed the perfect physical traits of money. It was incredibly durable, highly resistant to wear and tear, and light enough to be carried in large quantities. Most importantly, because it only grew in the Maldives, it was completely impossible to forage or harvest locally in landlocked empires. You couldn't just pick them up off the ground in ancient China or West Africa, which meant their supply remained stable, preventing inflation. It was the first truly global currency. Yet, as global trade routes expanded and transactions grew larger, counting out tens of thousands of individual cowrie shells or hauling heavy sacks of unstandardized gold and silver bullion became a nightmare. Before the invention of coins, precious metals were traded as raw bullion, irregular nuggets, heavy rings, or bags of metallic dust. To make a purchase, a merchant had to bring a balance scale to weigh the metal, and the seller had to use a touchstone or test acid to verify that the gold wasn't heavily diluted with cheap copper or lead. It was a slow, tedious process filled with constant suspicion, arguments, and fraud. The final leap in the evolution of money happened around 600 BCE in the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, located in modern-day Turkey. Lydia sat at the perfect geographical crossroads of trade between East and West. Running directly through their capital city of Sardis was the Pactolus River, which washed down massive deposits of electrum, a natural, sparkling alloy of gold and silver. Lydian merchants used this electrum to make payments, but because the ratio of gold to silver in electrum varies wildly in nature, transactions were still plagued by constant testing and weighing. Under the reign of Aliats and his son, the legendarily wealthy King Croesus, Lydian metallurgists achieved a massive scientific breakthrough. They developed a precise chemical refining process to separate natural electrum into pure gold and pure silver. With this new technology, King Croesus did something brilliant. He minted standardized metal discs of precise, uniform weights of pure gold and pure silver. To prove their authenticity, he stamped each metal disc with a royal insignia, the profile of a roaring lion and a charging bull. That stamp changed human psychology forever. The royal seal was a legal guarantee from the king himself. It told merchants, this coin is exactly 10.7 grams of pure gold. Do not waste your time weighing it. Do not waste your time testing it. If you do not trust the merchant standing in front of you, trust the royal crown stamped on this metal. Trade instantly exploded. The tedious chore of testing metal was replaced by a rapid, psychological transaction. Trust had been standardized, stamped, and distributed to the masses. So, the next time you pull out your phone, tap your card against a terminal, and hear that satisfying electronic beep, take a second to remember, you are not using a modern, high-tech invention. You are playing the exact same game of abstract social trust invented by Sumerian accountants pressing clay tokens into wet mud, and Lydian metallurgists stamping gold lions in the dust 2,600 years ago. You are here today because your ancestors agreed on a shared illusion. You are history.